December 2nd, 1999, 4:30 in the morning. Island Park, Long Island, a narrow strip of waterfront neighborhoods wedged between the bay and the Atlantic, where houses sit so close to the water that high tide laps against the bulkheads. At 9 Warwick Road, a 2-story colonial with a 100-foot pier extending into Reynolds Channel, the lights are off. Inside, Vincent Palermo is asleep beside his wife Angela. He's 55 years old. He hasn't held a legitimate job in decades. The mortgage on this house is overdue. He owes $68,000 in back taxes. He has 2 Social Security numbers and a waterfront mansion that announces to anyone paying attention that something about this man's finances doesn't add up. Outside, FBI agents from Squad C10 of the New York Organized Crime Branch are moving into position. They've been building this case for 2 years, and the centerpiece of their evidence is approximately 300 secret recordings. Audio captured on concealed devices and rigged cell phones carried by a man Palermo personally promoted to the inner circle of the DeCavalcante crime family just 14 months ago. That man, Ralph Guarino, is already in federal custody. He's been cooperating since January of 1998. Every conversation, every sit-down, every casual remark Palermo made in Guarino's presence was transmitted directly to the Bureau. Palermo doesn't know this yet. In a few minutes, he will. The agents knock. The arrest is one of 39 happening simultaneously across New Jersey, New York, and Florida, a coordinated sweep that will dismantle the leadership of the only homegrown Mafia family in the state of New Jersey. The indictment waiting for Palermo in the Southern District of New York lists 23 acts of racketeering. 4 of them are murders. He committed each one personally or ordered it done. Within weeks of this morning, Palermo will make a choice that no boss in the DeCavalcante family's 100-year history has ever made. He'll become a cooperating witness for the same government that just put him in handcuffs. And in doing so, he'll trigger the most devastating chain of betrayals the family has ever known. But that's the part of the story people sometimes hear. The acting boss who flipped, the real Tony Soprano, the man whose family inspired the most celebrated mob drama in television history, who turned rat while the show was still on the air. That framing isn't wrong. It's just the top layer. Underneath it is a man whose contradictions run deeper than any fictional character could hold. An altar boy who shot a man 7 times in the face, a father who drove his daughters to brownie meetings and then ordered the murder of his own bodyguard, a wholesale fish worker from Brooklyn who infiltrated Wall Street and ran a strip club in Queens, and ended up, years after all of this, opening more strip clubs in Houston, Texas under a name. The government gave him until the law found him again. The fiction ended with a cut to black. The reality kept going. And where it went is a story nobody tells. Vincent Palermo was born on June 4th, 1944 in New York City and raised in Brooklyn. His father was an Italian immigrant who'd arrived in America as a teenager. His mother was a bedridden asthmatic who spent most of Vincent's childhood unable to leave the house. There were 8 children, 5 sisters, including Claire and Nancy, and 2 brothers. The family was working-class Catholic, rooted in the kind of Brooklyn parish life where the church organized the neighborhood as much as the street did. Young Vincent served as an altar boy at Sacred Heart Church. He attended school. He did what was expected. And then his father died, and Vincent was 16 years old. He dropped out immediately, took 2 jobs to keep the family together, 8 mouths to feed, a mother who couldn't work, and no safety net beyond what a teenager could carry. One of those jobs was at a wholesale fish business operating out of the Fulton Fish Market in Lower Manhattan, the sprawling overnight marketplace where trucks backed up to loading docks at 2 in the morning and men in rubber boots hauled crates of mackerel onto pallets before the rest of the city woke up. The Fulton Fish Market had been mob-connected for decades. The Genovese family controlled much of the distribution, and the line between legitimate commerce and criminal enterprise was, for the men who worked there, functionally invisible. Palermo's fish business reportedly doubled as a front for a numbers racket. His early morning hours at the market gave him a nickname that stuck for the rest of his life. They called him Vinny Ocean. His only arrest during these years was for stealing shrimp, a misdemeanor. It would remain the sole entry on his criminal record for the next 3 decades, a fact that speaks less to his innocence than to his discipline. Palermo understood, even as a young man, that the safest way to operate was to leave no trace. He stayed away from mob-run social clubs, an unusual habit for someone rising in organized crime, where the social club was the default gathering point and loyalty was performed over espresso and card games. He spoke to very few people. He cultivated relationships across multiple crime families, Gambino, Colombo, Lucchese, without becoming dependent on any of them. Around 1965, he married the niece of Simone DeCavalcante, known to the FBI as Sam the Plumber and known to the men who worked for him as the boss of New Jersey's only independent Mafia family. That marriage pulled Palermo into a world that had been running in the shadow of New York's 5 families since the 1920s. Sam took a liking to the young man, invited him to the social club in Kenilworth, New Jersey, and let him absorb the rhythms of family business conducted in the back rooms of a plumbing supply company. What Palermo's exact role was during those years, what jobs he ran, what money he moved, the record doesn't fully specify. What's documented is the trajectory. By the time Sam DeCavalcante retired in the early 1980s and control passed to Giovanni Rigi, Palermo had become a man whose name carried weight that his modest public profile didn't explain. He married a second time, a woman named Angela. He had at least 5 children: Michael, who would graduate from Fordham University and work as a stockbroker at Goldman Sachs; Renee, Danielle, Tara, and Vincent Jr. And the details that survive from his domestic life are worth sitting with, because they complicate the story in a way the headline version never does. He once stopped a man from beating his son in public. He rescued a toddler relative who'd fallen into a swimming pool. He took in a troubled teenager named Richard, not a relative, not a favor to anyone in the family, and served as the boy's godfather, hosting him every weekend for a year while Richard prepared for his Catholic sacraments. He drove his daughters to brownie meetings. He watched the movie Annie with one of his girls so many times that, according to people who knew the family, the tape wore out. None of this changes what came after. But it's who Palermo was when the criminal world wasn't watching. And the gap between that man and what he did inside the family is the fault line that runs through this entire story. He carried his own suitcases. He paid alimony to his first wife. He owed money to hospitals and doctors. His waterfront mansion had a 100-foot pier, and the mortgage was a problem. Vinny Ocean was a man who couldn't afford the life he'd built, not legitimately, and not forever. The family he'd married into had the same problem. The DeCavalcante crime family traces its roots to immigrants from Ribera, a small town in the Agrigento province of Sicily, who settled in Iron, the Peterstown neighborhood of Elizabeth, New Jersey, in the early 20th century. The earliest known boss was Filippo Amari, who built a crew of roughly 20 to 30 maid members in the 1920s. Leadership passed to Nicholas Delmore, who attended the infamous 1957 Appalachian Convention alongside bosses from across the country, and then, in 1964, to Simone DeCavalcante himself, the man who gave the family its lasting name. Sam the plumber was a contradiction in his own right. He was careful, bureaucratic, and deeply concerned with protocol, the kind of boss who kept records, maintained alliances through diplomacy rather than violence, and understood that a small family survived by making itself useful to larger ones. Under his leadership, the DeCavalcante crew grew to approximately 60 made members. He oversaw a gambling ring that generated an estimated $20 million a year. And he achieved something no boss of a family this size had ever managed. He won a seat on the Mafia Commission, the governing body that arbitrated disputes between the major families. For a crew from New Jersey, that was the equivalent of a minor league team being invited to the World Series. But the recognition came with a price. The New York families never let the DeCavalcante members forget where they stood. They called them the Farmers, a jab at New Jersey's Garden State identity that stuck for decades. In both the 1960s and the 1990s, FBI recordings captured DeCavalcante members bemoaning the lack of respect they received across the river. 60 members versus the 100 to 250 maintained by each of the 5 families. A $20 million gambling operation versus New York enterprises that dwarfed it. The DeCavalcante family was real, it was dangerous, and it was perpetually in the shadow of organizations that treated it like a regional afterthought. The FBI first pierced the family's silence in the early 1960s. From 1961 to 1965, agents installed bugs, without judicial warrants, as was common practice then, at 4 locations, including Sam DeCavalcante's plumbing company in Kenilworth. The operation generated approximately 2,300 pages of transcripts. Because the surveillance was warrantless, none of it was admissible in court. But when the recordings became public in June of 1969, through a legal blunder by DeCavalcante's own attorney, they confirmed Joe Valachi's earlier testimony about La Cosa Nostra's structure, revealed 8 murders, and provided the first real window into how a mafia family actually governed itself from the inside. On one tape, Sam DeCavalcante told his secretary about a recurring nightmare. "I had a terrible dream," he said, "about a bunch of cops, a boss of a New Jersey crime family, anxious and haunted, confessing his fears to the woman who typed his letters." Decades later, a fictional version of exactly that dynamic, a New Jersey mob boss, anxious and haunted, confessing to a woman in a professional setting, would become the most watched drama on American television. Sam retired in the early 80s. Giovanni John the Eagle Riggi took control and built the family's power base around labor and construction racketeering. Riggi controlled Local 394 of the Laborers International Union in Elizabeth and District Council 30 in Milburn. He reportedly boasted that not a nail went through a wall in his territory without his people getting a piece. The family's domain covered Union, Middlesex, Monmouth, Ocean, and Essex counties, the suburban sprawl of central New Jersey, where construction never stopped and union contracts meant everything. Riggi ran the family until 1990, when a federal racketeering conviction sent him to prison. He appointed an acting boss to run things in his absence. That first appointment didn't last, neither did the second. The men Riggi trusted to hold the seat kept dying, disappearing, or getting themselves killed. And the reasons they died are what made Vincent Palermo the boss. September 11th, 1989. Not the September 11th the world remembers, a different one, 10 years before the other changed everything. Staten Island, Wellington Court, a man named Fred Weiss stepped out of his girlfriend's condominium and walked toward his car. Weiss was a former city editor of the Staten Island Advance who'd moved into real estate and gotten entangled with mob-connected partners in a scheme to illegally dump dangerous medical waste on vacant Staten Island property. When local authorities started investigating, Gambino boss John Gotti decided Weiss was a liability, the kind of man who might cooperate to save himself. Gotti wanted him gone. But Gotti didn't want Gambino hands on the job. The request traveled from Gotti to DeCavalcante boss Riggi, from Riggi to Captain Anthony Rotondo, and from Rotondo to Vincent Palermo. Palermo and an associate named James Gallo waited outside the condominium that morning. When Weiss reached his car, they shot him 7 times in the face and head. Anthony Capo drove the getaway vehicle. For this murder, Palermo was promoted from soldier to capo regime and given his own crew. A service killing for another family, executed cleanly. The kind of job that proves a man can be trusted with the work nobody wants to do. 2 years later, on November 11th, 1991, the family eliminated Louis Larasso, a former underboss who'd attended the Appalachian Convention back in '57 and was now viewed as a threat to Riggi's control from prison. Consigliere Stefano Vitabile, Captain Philip Abramo, and Captain Giuseppe Schifiliti voted to kill him. Schifiliti lured Larasso to a meeting at a soldier's home. Members of Abramo's crew did the rest. Larasso's car was later found at the airport, staged to suggest he'd traveled. His body was never recovered. Then came the killing that years later would write itself into television history. John D'Amato had been Riggi's first choice as acting boss, appointed around 1990. But D'Amato generated grievances almost immediately. He was seen as a puppet of Gotti. He was accused of stealing from the family, and he made enemies among the captains who felt he'd been installed over their heads. The grievance that sealed his fate, though, was something else entirely. D'Amato's girlfriend, identified in court records only as Kelly, told Captain Anthony Rotondo that D'Amato was bisexual. She described visits to Manhattan sex clubs where D'Amato had sex with other men. Rotondo brought the information to underboss Giacomo Amari and Consigliere Vitabile. According to Capo's later testimony, "Nobody's going to respect us if we have a gay homosexual boss sitting down discussing La Cosa Nostra, business." Vitabile authorized the murder without seeking the required approval from the commission. January 6, 1992. Capo and Victor Di Chiara picked up D'Amato near his girlfriend's house in Brooklyn. In the back seat, Capo turned and shot D'Amato twice. D'Amato groaned, "Oh no!" and Capo fired twice more. They drove the body to the Mill Basin home of Capo Rudy Ferrone, where Palermo was waiting. They searched D'Amato's pockets. Inside, they found $8,000 in cash and the business card of an FBI agent. Nobody has ever confirmed whether D'Amato was actually cooperating or merely exploring the option. The body was wrapped in plastic, loaded into Ferrone's black Cadillac, and driven upstate by Ferrone and Palermo to a farm owned by DeCavalcante soldier Philip Lamella in Newburgh, New York. The remains were never found. October 10, 1998, Diker Beach Park and Golf Course, Brooklyn. Joseph Masella, Palermo's own bodyguard, a man who'd been at his side for years, received a phone call from a bookmaker named Steve, claiming to have $10,000 to deliver. Masella was a degenerate gambler who owed approximately $450,000 to various mobsters, including Gambino family members, and Palermo had decided the debt made him a liability. Masella drove to the golf course parking lot. According to trial testimony, Associate Anthony Greco asked him, "You know what's about to happen, right?" Then Greco shot him. Masella died of his wounds at the hospital shortly after. The killing solved one problem and created another. To fill the vacancy in his crew, Palermo promoted Ralph Guarino, the man he trusted, the man who'd proven himself useful, the man who'd been wearing a wire for the FBI since January. Palermo personally elevated the instrument of his own destruction, and he did it to replace the bodyguard he just had killed. The money that justified all of this came from two primary sources, and both of them operated with a mechanical precision that the surface-level accounts never capture. The first was Wall Street. Captain Philip Abramo, known in law enforcement circles as the King of Wall Street, held an accounting degree from Pace University and was, by the standards of traditional organized crime, an anomaly. Operating from South Florida, Abramo built a hidden empire behind at least 4 brokerage firms: Sovereign Equity Management Corporation in Boca Raton, its sister firm Falcon Trading Group, and 2 penny stock houses called Toluca Pacific Securities and Greenway Capital. The scheme worked like this. First, Abramo's people identified financially troubled companies willing to have their stock distributed publicly. They exploited a loophole in SEC Regulation S, which allowed restricted stock to be sold to foreign nationals after a 40-day holding period. Through an attorney named Obi Pindling, the son of former Bahamian Prime Minister Sir Lyndon Pindling, they formed shell companies in the Bahamas to acquire shares at deep discounts through offshore accounts they secretly controlled. Then Sovereign's brokers went to work, cold-calling retail investors and pushing the manipulated stocks through high-pressure sales tactics. That was the pump. When the share prices rose on the artificial demand, the defendants sold their discounted shares at the inflated prices through their Bahamian corporations. That was the dump. When brokers inside the firm resisted or tried to sell competing stocks, the response was direct: pistol whippings and threats of violence. Bloomberg Businessweek ran a cover story in December of 1996 documenting the mob's infiltration of Wall Street, with the DeCavalcante operation at its center. Specific stocks manipulated included Technogen Corporation, a Vancouver microcap, and SC&T International, a Phoenix company whose IPO was managed by Sovereign at $5 per share after insiders acquired their positions at roughly $1.33. Documented illicit profits exceeded $4.7 million in Florida and New York alone. The sealed indictment alleged profits in the tens of millions across the full operation. On June 14, 2000, a federal sweep charged 120 people, described at the time as the biggest stock scam in American history, involving members of all 5 families, plus the DeCavalcante family. Palermo's own primary business was Wiggles, a strip club in Forest Hills, Queens, which doubled as a money laundering operation and would later become the real-life model for the Bada Bing on The Sopranos. He ran extensive illegal bookmaking operations in partnership with Gambino and Colombo captains, maintained a loan sharking portfolio, and managed Abramo's loan book when Abramo went to prison. Court records also list stolen goods trafficking among his enterprises: 2,250 cases of Du Torre Pinot Grigio, 1,630 cases of Nucci clothing, 29,000 packages of Centrum vitamins, and 56 Minolta digital copiers. The DeCavalcante family may have been the farmers of the American Mafia, but their acting boss was running a criminal conglomerate that stretched from the floor of Wiggles to the trading desks of Boca Raton. And the whole time, every transaction, every phone call, every sit-down in a car, Ralph Guarino was listening. If you're still with me on this one, a subscribe would mean a lot, because this story is about going somewhere nobody expected. March 3rd, 1999, less than 2 months after The Sopranos premiered on HBO. Ralph Guarino is in a car with 3 DeCavalcante members, Joseph Sclafani, Anthony Rotondo, and a Brooklyn club owner identified in the transcripts only as Billy. They're driving to a sit-down with New York mobsters. The concealed recorder on Guarino's body is running. The conversation turns to the new television show, and what follows is one of the most surreal documents in organized crime history, later published by Harper's Magazine under the title La Drama Nostra. Sclafani opened it. "Hey, what's this fucking thing, Sopranos? What the fuck are they? Is that supposed to be us?" Rotondo, who'd clearly been watching closely, told him, "You're in there." When Sclafani pressed, "Yeah, what did they say?" Billy laughed and said, "Watch out for that guy," they said. "Watch that guy." Guarino, the man with the wire, laughed too. Rotondo kept going, offering what amounted to a weekly viewing guide. Every show you watch, more and more you pick up somebody. One week it was Corky, meaning Gaetano Vastola, a DeCavalcante member. Sclafani, annoyed at not being represented, complained, "Yeah, but it's not me. I'm not even existing over there." Then, more urgently, "Yeah, but where do they get this information from?" They identified specific locations from their territory appearing on screen. "There's a pork store. Yeah, in Jersey, right? They got a topless joint over there. Jesus." Rotondo's final verdict was delivered with what sounds on the page like genuine admiration. What characters, great acting. The parallels between the DeCavalcante family and the fictional DeMeo family on the show are extensive. Jackie Aprile, the acting boss who dies of stomach cancer in season 1, mirrors Giacomo Amari, the DeCavalcante acting boss who died of stomach cancer in June of 1997, a parallel Rotondo himself noted during his later court testimony. The Vito Spatafore storyline, the man outed as gay and murdered by his own family in seasons 5 and 6, directly mirrors the D'Amato killing. Actor Joseph Ganiscoli confirmed that the D'Amato story, which became public during the 2003 trial, was the starting line for Vito's character arc. The Bada Bing mirrors Wiggles, the Tony Soprano and Uncle Junior dynamic. Junior is nominal boss, Tony holding real power, mirrors the Riggi and Palermo arrangement. The ruling panel conflict mirrors the Palermo and Charles Mahuri feud. David Chase, who created the show, has never explicitly confirmed the DeCavalcante family as his primary model. He's cited the Boiardo family, another New Jersey outfit from his childhood neighborhood, and acknowledged that Tony Soprano's mother, Livia, was based on his own mother. The direct causal link between the DeCavalcante family and the Sopranos rests on documented parallels and circumstantial evidence, not on a Chase admission. That distinction matters. But the men in the car that day, the real mobsters, watching themselves reflected in fiction while an FBI informant recorded their reactions, didn't need David Chase to confirm anything. They recognized their own lives on screen, and the man capturing the proof of that recognition was the same man who would help destroy everything they'd built. Guarino's path to that car had begun 14 months earlier. On January 14th, 1998, he masterminded the robbery of a Bank of America office inside One World Trade Center, stealing approximately $1.6 million from a Brinks delivery in about 15 minutes. Arrested 6 days later on Staten Island, facing 20 years, Guarino agreed to cooperate on January 20th. The FBI gave him cell phones rigged with surveillance equipment to hand out to DeCavalcante members. They fitted him with concealed recording devices. Over the next 2 years, he made roughly 300 consensual recordings, capturing discussions of murders, criminal enterprises, family politics, and the daily mechanics of running a New Jersey crime organization in the late 1990s. The FBI's strategy was patient and surgical. They let Guarino's status rise naturally within the family. And when Palermo needed a replacement after the Mafia, murder. In October of '98, the Bureau's asset was in position. Palermo promoted Guarino to made man, placing a cooperating witness inside the DeCavalcante inner circle with the boss's personal endorsement. Among the most devastating recordings was a conversation in which Palermo proposed the murder of Frank De Amato, John's brother, whom the family feared might seek revenge. An acting boss on tape ordering a hit. The case was built. December 2nd, 1999. The sweep. 39 arrests. And then something happened that nobody, not the FBI, not the prosecutors, not the defense attorneys, had seen from this family before. The dominoes fell. Anthony Capo flipped approximately 1 week after his arrest, becoming the first member in the DeCavalcante family's 100-year history to cooperate with the government. FBI agent Seamus McInerney, who ran the case, later described his approach to breaking Capo. "I basically studied him like you would study for a PSI test. I knew everything about him. I knew where he lived. I knew his kids' names. I even knew he was diabetic." McInerney brought orange juice and chocolate to the interrogation for Capo's blood sugar. Victor de Chiara followed. Then Anthony Rotondo, the captain who'd analyzed the Sopranos on tape. Then Palermo himself. An acting boss, a captain, a soldier, and 4 associates. McInerney would later say, "That was very, very unique. Since that time frame, no other member in that family has cooperated. 25 years plus." Palermo agreed to cooperate within weeks of his arrest. He was released on $20 million bond with strict house arrest at his Island Park mansion in March of 2000. He pleaded guilty in a secret hearing before Manhattan federal judge Lawrence McKenna, admitting to 4 murders, 7 murder conspiracies, extortion, loan sharking, gambling, and obstruction of justice. On October 24th, 2000, the New York Daily News broke the Hawaii story. Reporter Greg B. Smith revealed that Palermo was the 3rd boss in recent Mafia history to become a government informant, following Lucchese's acting boss Alfonso Darco and Philadelphia boss Ralph Natali. FBI Director Barry Mon held a press conference. The DeCavalcante family plotted and committed killings on the streets of New York, he said, while at the same time attempting to make a killing on Wall Street. A man who killed 4 people, including his own bodyguard, bought his freedom by giving up every secret he'd ever held. Whether that's justice or just another kind of transaction, the same cold self-interest that produced the violence, redirected toward a different buyer, that's a question worth sitting with. Tell me what you think in the comments. The damage was total. Palermo's cooperation, combined with the testimony of Capo, Di Chiara, and Rotondo, produced 71 convictions and solved 11 murders across 7 federal trials. Consigliere Stefano, Vitabile, Captain Philip Abramo, and Captain Giuseppe Schifaliti were all sentenced to life in 2006, though the Second Circuit Court of Appeals overturned those convictions in 2008, finding that prosecutors had improperly admitted plea allocutions from non-testifying co-conspirators. The procedural error didn't undo the damage to the family. Between 1999 and 2005, approximately 45 DeCavalcante members were imprisoned, including the consigliere and 7 capo regimes. The family that had spent decades being dismissed as farmers was now, thanks to the Sopranos, the most publicly recognizable mob organization in the country. The irony cut both ways. The show gave them a kind of fame they'd never had, but that fame and the attention it drew made them easier to monitor, easier to identify, and easier to prosecute. Real mobsters began emulating fictional characters, growing careless in ways their predecessors never would have. Analysts called it the Soprano effect. For the DeCavalcante family, the show that recognized them also helped finish them. Leadership passed through a series of caretakers. Joseph Miranda served as acting boss from 2005 to 2007. Francesco Guaracci, a recruit from Ribera, Sicily, the same town the family's founders had left a century earlier, ran things until his death in 2016. And then, in a turn that carries its own bitter symmetry, control settled on Charles Majuri, the very man who had once plotted to murder Palermo during their rivalry over the ruling panel. Majuri became boss after his 2009 days of release from prison. A later FBI operation, called Operation Charlie Horse, running from 2012 to 2015, sent undercover agent Giovanni Rocco inside the family and produced 10 more arrests. As McInerney warned in a recent interview, they've been around for 100 and up Haiti 25 years. If you don't keep an eye on them, they're going to rebuild. Palermo served approximately 2 years in federal prison before entering the witness security program. The government gave him a new name, James Cabela. His wife became Deborah Cabela. His son became Vincent Cabela Jr. They relocated to the Houston, Texas metropolitan area around 2002 and settled in a gated mansion at 9105 Memorial Drive. And here is where the story becomes something the mainstream accounts never reach. Because Vincent Palermo, given a new identity and a second chance at a legitimate life, did not become a different man. He opened the Penthouse Club and the All-Star Men's Club on Westheimer Boulevard in Houston. He acquired a stake in baby dolls at 6340 Westheimer, strip clubs again. The same business that had fronted his criminal life in Queens. Between January of 2006 and August of 2007, Houston police conducted 7 sting operations at his establishments, documenting prostitution and drug offenses. His identity was exposed in 2009 when he and other club owners sued the city of Houston over licensing restrictions, the kind of lawsuit that requires public filings, real names, traceable addresses. Reporters connected James Cabela to Vincent Palermo. The New York Daily News published the story on September 14, 2009. His credibility as a government witness suffered further when prosecutors discovered he'd transferred approximately $1.75 million from strip club earnings to his son Michael without disclosing it to the FBI. By 2011, he was being sued by a former business partner for defaulting on a $1.3 million promissory note. On March 4, 2013, he filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, case number 4:13-BK-31331, United States bankruptcy. Court, Southern District of Texas. The man who'd once run New Jersey's Mafia couldn't cover his debts in Houston either. The mansion at 9105 Memorial Drive sold at auction on August 5, 2016 for $2.85 million. The pier on Long Island is someone else's now. Wiggles was shut down by the city of New York years ago. The Penthouse Club on Westheimer changed hands. The DeCavalcante family is still active, diminished, monitored, but operational, run by men who remember what Palermo did and who owe their positions in part to the vacuum his betrayal created. Vincent Palermo is 81 years old. No death record has been filed. No journalist has reported seeing him. The name James Cabela appears on a bankruptcy petition in the Southern District of Texas, and then it disappears. The real Tony Soprano didn't end in a diner in New Jersey with a cut to black and a song on the jukebox. He ended in a courtroom in Houston, arguing over a promissory note he couldn't pay, and then he was gone.